In this video, we're going to go over setting up the physics elements in Blender, and we might do some follow-ups with some more specific tasks because there's lots of different things that we can add or change or do in this. So I'm going to go ahead and take this cube. I'm going to make this into like a tabletop or something, but to do that, I'm going to tab into it rather than just scale it down and scale it out, mainly because it'll calculate all the different things differently, and that's actually a problem many of you ran into with the triple level houses that we were doing, is that some of you scaled the boxes before going into edit mode. I highly recommend you do that in edit mode when you're changing the dimensions and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and hit S, and I'm going to scale this down, make it a little bit thinner. I'm going to hit S again, Shift and Z, and I'm going to, Shift Z, there we go. And I'm going to pull this out quite a bit. Hit Tab. Now, I'm going to go over on the side here to the Physics tab. Make this a little bit larger here. Pull it out like so. And so, Physics tab, here I have the options to add active, add passive, remove, change shape, calculate mass. Over in my Properties editor, I have a Physics tab, which is at the very end. And here we have some other options too. Again, I could actually do this, the rigid body tools, by just clicking here. Before I do that, I want to point out that since I haven't created a rigid body world yet, I have the option to create one here in the scene settings. And once I create, though this is an active, I'll see that, or actually I'm going to create it as a passive. So I'm going to say add passive. And now I have my rigid body world. I can bake calculations if I want to make things speed up a little bit. And I can do have the different weights apply to it so that not everything's affecting those objects, and you can mess around with it quite a bit. I'm going to go back to the Physics tab. I now see this here. So here I have my mesh. I'm going to leave this as mesh. Actually, I found that it reacts much better. There's a bounciness option, which I'm going to go ahead and move up. And right now, since this is a passive object, it's unmoving, that means that mass doesn't matter to it. Whereas if I add something like a UV sphere, and let's pull that up a little bit, and if I go to where it says rigid body active is what I want. I don't want animated because that's just going to leave it right where it's at. Mass by default is 1. I'm going to change this to mesh as well. And then I'm going to leave, actually I'll move bounciness up maybe a little bit higher. And if I hit play right now, get a little bit of a, well, there wasn't much of anything to talk about there, was it? So I'm going to hit pause. I'm going to go back to the beginning of it. And I'm going to go, just click on this. You can play around with the settings, see what works best. Sensitivity or margin will be how close it lets it get in the calculations. If something's moving too fast, and it's moving so fast that it doesn't detect that it's going to collide, say, here, and it's already on this side of the object by the time it says, oh, there's, where it's saying, am I hitting anything between those two steps, then it'll miss this entirely. So I'm going to go back to world, and not world, but to the scene settings. And in our rigid body world, we can also adjust the steps per second. I'm going to go ahead and set this to 120. If it's something fairly simple, like what I'm doing, bumping this up isn't going to make too much of a dent on things. I can even do 240 for right now and see what it does. And I'm just going to see where we're at there. So really the only thing I changed there was those steps per second and that made a little bit of a difference in how it works. If I take this panel, I can even like bounce the ball up with it. And so it is somewhat interactive, but you should be aware that if you have an object like this and you are hitting play and you go to move it or something like that, then when you go back, so let's say I pause it there and I say, I wonder what it would be like here, and I move this back to the beginning, I just moved it where it's going to start off. And so if you adjust any objects in a scene, that's what it'll do. Shift D is duplicate. And so those are all similarly structured, and so they'll interact with each other, they'll hit each other, etc. But again, you can change settings there. There's also in that physics tab, there's other things that we're going to get into more, but just to mess around with it just for a second, you can even turn on like soft body, and I'm going to collapse these a little bit, and that one, and I'm going to open up this one. And so you can again tell it what steps it's going to be taking. You can bake those. You can set a goal for it. This is how rigid it will remain. So let's say I tab into this object. Let's say scale it up a little bit, maybe without the other one in it. There we go. And let's see what weird things happen with this. Okay, so there it's kind of jiggling and deforming a little bit. If I go back and change my goal, so goal strength, and I move it down, let's move it down to like 3, okay, and I hit play, it just kind of, yeah, did something really weird there and going through and it's going back, and it, yeah, that might not be what we want. So again, part of that's going to be taking the calculations and figuring out what's going on with it. It's still considering the center of the object right there, but it's really, really distorting that. So I'm going to go back, and if I move that goal higher, all the way to 1, and hit play, there again it's acting a little bit differently, but it's not acting the same as it was before. If I change other settings, so it's good to mess around with this, feel free to like try out some of the like in the rigid body world things, some of the settings there, they're rigid body collisions. Go ahead and try to change things to like sphere. See what it does. Here I can see that this is not aligned with the sphere that I have. And so that soft body interaction, for some reason, moved that center away from where it was. Have no idea why, but that's part of the reason why it was doing the very weird physics thing that we were looking at just a moment ago. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of undo a few steps there. There we go. And you can also, as you're working with these, excuse me, clear my throat. So you can also do things with like particles, flames, fire, all of that. I'll pay attention to how physics works. If I go over to this side here, I can also do calculate mass, and so I can tell it like, okay, I want this to be iron, okay, or let's do lead. And here I have a much, much higher number than 1, versus let's take this one, and let's take that and do calculate mass, and let's call this one cork. Okay, so much lower number. And of course these are at 1 right here. And so if I do play, and that shot the cork really, really far because the cork has so much less mass. And so there's different ways of playing with this as well. So that's all we'll cover in this video, and we will cover some more things that incorporate physics in them in our other videos.